The Raiders, who are currently riding a 2-game winning streak, is looking up saying, who's next? Well, if you look at the schedule, you know it's the Indianapolis Colts Week 17 action. We'll compare and contrast. We'll talk all things Colts, all things Raiders on this Thursday, December 28th, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thank you. We appreciate that. The YouTube page has grown in such a major way, and that's because of you, Raider Nation. Whether you give us 3 minutes or 33 minutes, we appreciate all the time you can spare us on the daily. And, of course, my man Ari is the reason why we're up on YouTube. He does a fantastic job each and every day. You can hit him up on Twitter at Ari Producers. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. Normally, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. But since it's the crossover edition, no calls or texts. We'll do that on Friday, heading into the weekend, heading into a new year, and heading into Raiders Colts Week 17 action. Before I actually jump into the crossover edition with Zach Hicks, one of the hosts of Locked On Colts, did want to pass along a couple news and notes, little nuggets before we jump into it. And off top, it's the Raider roster moves that they made on Wednesday. They signed tight end Zach Gentry to the active roster from the Bengals practice squad, and in a corresponding move, they placed tight end Jesper Horsted on the reserve injured list. If you remember, Horsted didn't travel to Kansas City with the Raiders. He was left back in Las Vegas. That was something we found out on Sunday on Christmas Eve. So he's on the reserve injured list. His season's going to be over, and Zach Gentry is filling in the mix. Now, does that mean that Michael Mayer is going to come back? Well, we'll find out sooner rather than later. Hopefully he does, but we're not too sure. Obviously, there's only 2 games left, and he's got the grade A tear on his toe. So that's the situation that's going on with him. Also, the Raiders waived tackle Justin Herron. So those are the roster moves. They signed Zach Gentry, the tight end, off the Bengals practice squad. They placed Jesper Horsted, the tight end, on the reserve injured list, and waived tackle Justin Herron. Also, on Wednesday, we found out the 15 Pro Football Hall of Fame finalists. Eric Allen, EA, is one of them. Of course, a longtime Philadelphia Eagle, also a member of the Silver and Black, did a hell of a job with the Raiders when he was with the team. Really special to help develop Charles Woodson and teach him how to be a pro. He has been in position before to be a Hall of Famer. He's been on the ballot, but now he's made it to the finalists. And the winners, or the not winners, but the guys that are actually going to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame will be announced Super Bowl weekend. But 15 Pro Football Hall of Fame finalists, and Eric Allen is one of them. Amongst the group, Antonio Gates, Julius Peppers, Devin Hester, Patrick Willis, Dwight Freeney, Rodney Harrison, Darren Woodson, Jared Allen, Reggie Wayne, and others. So 15 total that are finalists, including Eric Allen, and that's what I really wanted to pass along. EA, now part of the Raiders broadcast, does the pregame and the postgame show with JT the Brick, does a fantastic job, and really happy. I like to call him a friend of mine. Knowing that he's a finalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame is awesome. I know it's something that he really, really wants. So we all got to hope that EA is able to make it into the Hall of Fame and be enshrined forever. Now it's time to jump into the crossover edition. Zach Hicks, one of the hosts of Locked On Colts, joins the show. We talk all things storylines. We talk all things matchups. And, of course, we give you our path to victory and a little score prediction as well. Before we do that, though, today's crossover edition is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the first part of the conversation. Part 1 here, Zach Hicks and me talking about the biggest storylines between the Colts and the Raiders.
Q, since you're the road team, you're my guest on today's show. What is your biggest storyline for this one for the Las Vegas Raiders?
Well, it's funny. I mean, there's so many different avenues that you can go with the storylines, but I think it's really just the way that this team is playing for this coach, right? I mean, Antonio Pierce takes over November 1st after Josh McDaniels gets fired, and a lot of us had no idea exactly what to expect, but I could tell that it was a breath of fresh air immediately. I could tell the difference between the players. I could tell the vibe in the building was just different. And all they are right now is 4-3 under Antonio Pierce. And now the last few weeks, they're playing with a ton of confidence. They're playing like Like they're the baddest team out there, right? Like they're the team that's expected to go and make a deep run in the playoffs. And, right now they're mathematically alive, but they need a lot of help to get into the playoffs. But none of that matters right now. They are playing for that coach. They're trying to prove to ownership, Mark Davis, that he is the guy that should be the dude moving forward. And we know, man, for covering the NFL, the interim coaches don't get the head coaching job, the permanent job very often. And even when they do, a lot of times they don't have a lot of success. But he's trying to prove that he's different, that that's the norm, and he is not the norm. And he's trying to, as he mentioned earlier this week, my resume is on the grass. So, I mean, I think that the biggest storyline when it comes to the Raiders is, yeah, they can make the playoffs potentially. Hell, there's a chance they could win the division, right? If the Chiefs lose out and the Raiders win out, they literally could win the division, which is wild to think since they fired their coach after on Halloween. But that's a possibility. But with all that being said, the biggest storyline is still the way this team is performing, those guys in the locker room for their head coach, Antonio Pierce.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting too, because when you're watching this Raiders team since the firing of Josh McDaniels, obviously we always see that interim coach, that first game in, you see the interim coach usually win that first game. We saw it last year with Jeff Saturday. Heck, you guys saw it last year with Jeff Saturday.
Very, very up close and personal, brother.
Yes. They always win that first game and they come out strong, and then it just implodes down the stretch. Like we saw last year here in Indy with Jeff Saturday, where they're losing by 30 plus points each game down the stretch. Whereas, other teams typically are not doing that. But with you guys, it seems like they're getting better each game with Antonio Pierce's tenure here. Again, 63 points does not happen very often, no matter who you're playing against. I mean, again, they're playing against a team that was kind of giving up, but still to drop 63, that's insane. And then to beat the Kansas City Chiefs, even in their down year, still being the Kansas City Chiefs. It seems like this team's just getting better and better every single week.
No, they are. And, they dropped 63 against the Chargers, and there's a reason why the Chargers quit. Right. There was a reason why they quit. The Raiders submitted them. They just like, okay, it's going to be our day today. You're not coming into our building and taking our lunch money. We're going to do that. And after the Chargers made so many mistakes, it was like, all right, game, set, match. And then the Chiefs, they had a plan, man. Antonio Pierce told us in the media room, hey, enough is enough. Enough is enough. We've had a lead on these guys, 17-0. We lost. Had a lead on these guys, 14-0. We lost. Enough is enough. We can go into their house, be the bully, and take their lunch money. And that's exactly what they did. And, you saw the frustrations from the Chiefs, but the Raiders believe that they could beat anybody. I mean, they really do. And right now, with the way that their defense is playing in particular, I don't really question it. I don't question it. I think that this is the best I've seen this team play, especially on defense, obviously in a ton of years, but just as a unit and trying to play for each other, it's been nice to see. And again, it's been something I haven't seen in a very long time. So again, that's got to be the biggest storyline for the Raiders, is just playing for Coach Antonio Pierce, how they could finish off this season. Can they win 2 more games and, end the season on a 4-game winning streak and let the chips fall where they may? Possibly. But, they've got to go out there and win the games, to get it done. But for the Colts, what's the biggest storyline for the Colts is, like you mentioned, they're in the 7th seed right now.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for the Colts right now is, what team are we? What team are we going to be in these last 2 games? Because we've seen so many different sides of this Colts team. Now, I know they've gone through a lot of adversity, losing their starting quarterback early this season for the year. Obviously, that changes all your plans. Jonathan Taylor missing most of the season. Shaquille Leonard, everything happening with that and leading to his ultimate release. But when you look at this Colts team, it's been a team of streaks and runs this year. They started off strong after a rough Jaguars game to start the year, but then fell to 3-5 early in the season. Then they went on a 4-game winning streak. I mean, again, they beat teams that they should have beaten, but they still beat those teams. Right. 4-game winning streak over Panthers, Patriots, Buccaneers, and Titans. And then we've seen this very bipolar team the last 3 weeks, where getting blown out by the Cincinnati Bengals, but then blowing out the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then getting blown out by the Atlanta Falcons. What football team are we right now? Like, are we the playoff team? Are we the 7 seed in this AFC, this really tight AFC race right now? Or are we the team that's just going to fold down the stretch and kind of succumb to being the backup quarterback team that was overachieving throughout the year? I think that's a big test for this team, especially with a rookie head coach. Again, with a lot of adversity they've been facing all year. How are they going to finish these last 2 games? Because with the way that the math falls for them, if they win these last 2 games, they're almost a lock for the playoffs. They would need a lot of things to fall against them. if they win these last 2 games to not make it. They're like a 99% chance, I believe. So they got to take care of business. They can't be watching the scoreboard. They can't be looking ahead to any next week. I mean, it's 2 games left to show what kind of football team you are. I know we can look at it and say this team's kind of overachieved this season, but let's go all the way with it. Let's overachieve to the max and make it into the playoffs.
Yeah, why stop now?
yeah, and this on a good streak. You've been overachieving all year, but let's push this to the playoffs. Now it's kind of the same way to the Raiders. Like win those last 2 games, see where the chips fall. Ultimately, it misses the playoffs. Whatever. You put out 10 wins this season, but for the Colts, you got to finish strong after this really bipolar stretch they're coming off of these last 3 weeks.
What has the value of Gardner Minshew been, right? I mean, look, this year across the league, it's been proven that you need to have a really quality backup. Anthony Richardson starts the season. He's out early with the injury. He misses the rest of the season, but Gardner Minshew slides right in. How comfortable has that allowed, the head coach there, Shane Steichen, to be, knowing that Gardner Minshew, at least, I mean, he's not a world beater, but he's been there and done that.
Yeah, if you look around the league, it's 59 quarterbacks have started games this year. Gardner Minshew has the most wins out of all the backup quarterbacks that have started games. Now, Joe Flacco is making a run for his money right now, but but Gardner Minshew has the most wins among all those backups that have started. And I think a lot of it came down to just his familiarity with Shane Steichen, where Steichen, yes, he had to completely change his offense from the preseason plan when Minshew stepped in, but he was changing it to a way that he already was prepared to potentially change it to. Just go heavy RPOs, go a little bit more in the gun, go more with getting the ball out quick and kind of taking away some of those deep balls, because that's just not what Gardner Minshew is. It's not the most efficient and effective way of playing offense in the NFL. It's not a sustainable way of playing offense in the NFL, but it is a way that Shane Steichen was able to find success with this year. It was able to sneak some wins out against, Baltimore Ravens, Houston Texans early in the season, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Those are all playoff teams right now. The Colts were able to win those type of games with Gardner Minshew at quarterback because Shane Steichen had that plan in place. So I'm not going to say that Gardner Minshew has been a world beater this year, because he hasn't. He's been probably just a below average quarterback, but in the landscape of the NFL, when you're going to your backup quarterback, to have below average, that's such a big advantage for your team to have below average. So, I mean, just having that on the bench has been a big plus for the Colts this year. But don't worry, guys, we're going to keep talking Colts Raiders coming up. We're going to talk all about the biggest matchups in this game, who we're looking at in this Colts Raiders game.
So there you go, Raider Nation. That was part 1 of the conversations. Biggest storylines between the Colts and the Raiders. Zach Hicks, one of the hosts of Locked On Colts, and myself breaking it on down. Coming up in segment number 2, we'll talk about the biggest matchups. What will we be looking at? What will we be paying attention to? Well, we'll tell you about it in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's you against the numbers. That's it. You're not battling thousands of other players, pros, sharks, none of that. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll in. I know a lot of people like to play the combo projections. What is that? Well, you could pick someone in the NBA. You could pick somebody in the NFL. You pick their stat projections. You go with more than or less than, and again, you watch the winnings roll in. It's just that simple. PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't come back, the player is rebooted just like that. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with the injury policy, injury insurance policy, I should say. Check them out today. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code is LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, crossover edition. Zach Hicks, host of Locked On Colts, and myself talking all things Week 17 action, Colts and Raiders. We already talked about the storylines. Now it's time to deep dive into the matchups. So here's Zach Hicks and myself talking about the biggest matchups with the Colts and the Raiders.
All right, Q, we're talking biggest matchups, Raiders, Colts, big playoff implications this weekend. Again, what kind of matchups are you looking at in this game, Q?
It's so funny, man. I look at this Raiders team and the roster, and I look at Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs if he's able to go. He hasn't gone the last 2 weeks, but I look at him, look at Jacoby Myers, look at Aiden O'Connell, the quarterback. Like, I look at all these offensive weapons and I say, is that my biggest matchup? And I say no. Like, this is the first time in so long that I say that that's a no. I look at the biggest matchups for this game, and I really look at this Raiders defensive line, right? From Max Crosby to Malcolm Coons to Tyree Wilson to, other big guys, John Jenkins. I mean, just all these other guys that are making plays, Adam Butler, all these dudes along the defensive line that are really making it happen for the Raiders defense. Like, they are the reason why this Raiders defense is all of a sudden having so much success and more success than they had early in the season. They're getting pressure on the quarterback. They're slowing down the run, and they're making things happen. Like, they're running around with swagger that they have all the confidence in the world that they could beat anybody, which is, again, for somebody who's been covering the Raiders and a fan of the Raiders for a very long time, it's just so new to me to see a defense that's playing the way that they're playing. I mean, they're averaging about 15 points a game that they're giving up. I mean, it's incredible. You couldn't have told me that this was going to be the storyline for the team early in the season. I've been like, yeah, right. That's not going to happen. It is so bizarre, but really Malcolm Koonce has come on so strong as of late. He's flying in off the edge. He's so fast that he's making life difficult. And of course, Max Crosby, I don't have to describe what he's going to bring to the table. He's one of the best in the business, but really, similar to last week, I thought that the biggest key to the game for the Raiders against the Chiefs was that interior push. Tyree Wilson's been playing a lot on the inside. He was drafted to be an outside guy, but he's been playing a lot on the inside, and he's starting to have a lot of success there. So I just think it's that whole defensive line going up against the Colts offensive line, which I know the Colts offensive line is good, right? I mean, there's a reason why Jonathan Taylor is able to run. There's a reason why the Colts have had plenty of success, is because that offensive line has done some really good things. I just think that this Raiders defensive line and the offensive line, they're going to get in the middle of the ring, and they're going to tie their shoelaces together. And like the last guys standing are going to be the ones that win. And so that's really where I look at it. I think everything's going to be built off the trenches. And if the Raiders defensive line can continue to have success like they've been having the last few games, I think they have a great shot in this game.
Yeah, and one big thing I want to add on that, we're recording this here on Wednesday night, guys. So I know by the time you're listening to this, you might hear a new injury report. But as of right now, Colts right tackle Braden Smith was a full participant in the Wednesday walkthrough. If he does go, I think this would be the second or third game this season where the Colts all 5 projected starting lineup at offensive line is actually starting a game.
Right.
There's been a lot of missed time from Braden Smith, from Ryan Kelly, from Bernhard Raimann missed a few games at left tackle as well. So this could be the first time we see the Colts offensive line at full strength. And you need a guy like Braden Smith against Max Crosby, because rookie Blake Freeland has not had the best run of late at right tackle. And Max Crosby is a very different animal there off the edge.
Yes.
Like, he's one of the greatest pass rushers in the NFL right now. There is one more defender I wanted to ask you about before we go over to the Colts, though. Cornerback Jack Jones is having a pretty good recent run of late. I believe, 2 defensive touchdowns the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
A guy that you guys got, I think, off waivers from the Patriots or something like that. Just been playing some great football the last 2 weeks. And when I'm looking at Gardner Minshew, he's been doing fine with the turnovers, but when I see those touchdowns from Jack Jones the last 2 weeks on late balls to the flat or late balls on hitches, it kind of scares me a little bit.
Well, I'll tell you this, man. He's been a great addition to this Raiders defense. He's a guy that was very familiar with Antonio Pierce going back to Long Beach Poly. He's called Antonio Pierce like a father figure to him. He was with AP there when they were at Arizona State. So, I mean, again, he's very familiar with Coach Pierce. And so Coach kind of knows how to get the most out of him. And, he's one of those guys I like to say has a little something in their neck, man. He's got a little edge to him, right? But Coach Pierce knows how to kind of calm him down and get him into the right zone and get his right frame of mind. But he's also a film junkie, like a film junkie. He told me after the first pick six that he had against the Chargers at Allegiant Stadium, he said, oh, yeah, as soon as I saw them line up, I knew exactly what play they were running. So I just went to where the ball was supposed to be. And he's all, I was actually upset. I thought I overran it and I wasn't going to catch the ball. I thought I got there too early. So he kind of pulled his arm back. It looked like he was more going for a slam dunk as opposed to intercepting the ball. And then this one on Christmas morning against Patrick Mahomes, I mean, he didn't even he really baited him, and he wasn't in the right stance. Like, he wasn't really standing the right way or backpedaling the right way to even make that play, but he knew it was coming, and that's all from film study. And so he just said it was a bad decision that he threw it. I was already breaking on it, and I made it happen. And that's when he took it to the house and he told Patrick Mahomes about himself on the way to the end zone. This dude's a guy, man. He's a real dude, and he's brought a lot of juice to that Raiders secondary. So yeah, that's a guy to definitely pay attention to. I'm sure that he's he's going to be looking to try to get 3 pick sixes in a row. He's already two weeks in a row he's been in the end zone. I think he's starting to get used to that. So he'll be looking to try to make a play on Sunday for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Now, switching to the other side of the ball, talking about the Colts defense versus the Raiders offense, my biggest matchup I'm looking for is how does this Colts defense respond against yet another backup quarterback? They have played almost exclusive backup quarterbacks this entire season, and it's been mixed results. Like I said, this bipolar type team where during their 4-game winning streak, they were going against, these guys aren't backups, but they're backup quality type guys right now, like Bryce Young, Mac Jones. Those guys are not the strongest players. Will Levis was the 4th guy in that bunch there. And the Colts did a really good job, sitting back, not getting beat deep with explosives and attacking underneath and forcing turnovers on those underneath throws. But these last couple of weeks, again, it's kind of been hit or miss. Mitchell Trubisky, they had a great game against, but then Jake Browning tore them to pieces with the screen game. This past week, Taylor Heineke had way too good of a game for Taylor Heineke to have against your defense. So what are they going to be like against Aiden O'Connell in this one? Aiden O'Connell coming off a game where he only threw for 62 yards in the first quarter. And that was pretty much it, or in the first half. And that was pretty much it. What kind of Colts defense are we going to see? Are we going to see another Colts defensive game plan where they sit back way too much and Aiden O'Connell's allowed to just live in the flats and live in the short game, and that's just not good enough for your defense right now? Or are they going to be a little more aggressive? Are they going to put more on this rookie quarterback's plate and ask him to beat them? I'm really curious to see what kind of game plan the Colts defense come out with, because if they're going to do what they did against Jake Browning and do what they did against Taylor Heineke, which is just sit back as far as possible and let them live in the short to flat. I mean, Aiden O'Connell will complete 80% of his passes. It might only be for like 6 yards an attempt, but he'll be able to move the ball more than he even was last week against the Kansas City Chiefs. So they got to be a little more aggressive. They got to come after him. They got to force this rookie to do a little bit more than what they forced Taylor Heineke to do or Jake Browning to do 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. Obviously that's something I'm paying attention to as well. I mean, as you mentioned, man, he didn't complete a pass after the first quarter on Christmas Day, right? I mean, he ended the game with 10 straight completions. Like, that's not going to work. Your defense scored 2 touchdowns, so that's great, but you can't count on that every week. Like, I can't say, oh yeah, they're going to go into this game against the Colts and going to get 2 touchdowns. They're going to get a fumble and a pick 6. Like, that's not realistic. So the offense is going to have to do something. He's going to have to do something. It's going to be interesting to see how he bounces back. I think the one thing that he has going for him is that he's been the starter since November 1st. Yeah. Right? I mean, ever since Antonio Pierce took over as the interim coach, that day he said, hey, he's our guy. Aiden O'Connell is our quarterback moving forward. He gives us the best chance to win. And he hasn't wavered from that. There's times I thought that, they should have took Aiden out and put Jimmy G back in against the Minnesota Vikings where the Raiders couldn't score any points into the game 3-0. I thought that was a game Jimmy G should have gone in. And some folks thought that there was, times on Christmas morning where they probably should have gone ahead and put Jimmy G in because Aiden O'Connell wasn't getting it done. But Antonio Pierce has rode with them. He's let him figure it out. He said that he didn't have that look in his eye, like he was anxious. He was had that poker face, and that's what he was comfortable with. So we'll see how he bounces back. I want to see what the game plan looks like. Like, how do they set him up for success? And if the Colts do sit back and let him just kind of have the flats open, then he'll take that, because at this point you need to have a couple layups, right? You need to just see the ball go through the hoop a couple times. And if he can see the ball go through the hoop a few times, it might open it up the rest of the game. So I don't think that that's a great approach for the Colts to take, is to sit back. But again, I don't know what their ultimate game plan is. And there's a reason why they're the coaches and not me.
We shall see. But coming up, guys, we're going to talk about how we think this game is going to go and our ultimate predictions, again, for this big playoff like atmosphere for the Raiders and the Colts.
So there you go. There's the biggest matchups. What we'll be paying attention to the most come Sunday when the Raiders are in Indy taking on the Indianapolis Colts. So what's the path to victory? What is it going to take for each team to come away with the dub? You already know that I think that the Raiders are going to win not only this game, but the next game against the Broncos. But how do I think they're going to get it done? You'll find that out coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. And we'll get to that right after I tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for small businesses, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion with the B professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time to resource or to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is quick and easy. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and even quicker. Right now, post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, crossover edition. We're talking Raiders. We're talking Colts. We've talked storylines. We talked matchups. What's the path to victory and what's the score prediction? I'll even give one of those as well. Zach Hicks and myself, we're talking path to victory here in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Check it out.
All right, Q. So we're talking Colts Raiders still. Big playoff implications yet again with this matchup this Sunday. It's going to be at Lucas Oil Stadium here in Indianapolis. Aiden O'Connell returning back to the place, pretty much where he played a lot of his college football there here in Indy. But Q, how do you think this game goes? I mean, again, the Raiders are red hot right now. I know that they're not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, but again, they're red hot. They're going to make a push for it. How do you think this game goes here on Sunday?
Yeah, I think the Raiders playoffs started 2 weeks ago, right? I mean, they really just have to win every game and then see what happens. That's what it is. So it is definitely a playoff game for them. If they lose, then, it's game, set, match. But this is how I look at this game. I look at it as the defense has to continue to do what it's done, right? The last 2 weeks, it's really ratcheted things up. It's created takeaways. It's got sacks on the quarterback. It's just really been that pressure cooker. It's been very difficult to move the ball on. It's very difficult to score against. I mean, they're out there playing loose and free. So I think that, first of all, for the Raiders to win this game on Sunday, that has to continue. That defense has to continue to play the way that they're playing. Patrick Graham has been dialing up a hell of a game plan each and every week for the Raiders defense. And, Antonio Pierce has got the pulse of him. He's a defensive minded coach. So, he's really loving what he's seeing on that side of the ball. But Zach, at the end of the day, you got to score points to win in the league. You got to score points. And again, you can't just rely on your defense and say, okay, they're going to score each and every week. So somehow, some way, this Raiders offense has got to find a way to get going. Aiden O'Connell, maybe because he'll be back where he's very familiar, as you mentioned, Lucas Oil Field, maybe he'll have a little bit more success there. He'll be a little bit more comfortable. It'll be inside. It's not cold like it was at Arrowhead. So maybe, he'll be able to hit a couple of the receivers. Because this is what happened, man. On Christmas morning, there was times where Devontae was open, he threw it behind him. There was times when other guys were open and it wasn't a good pass. The layups were there to hit, and he wasn't able to hit some. Now, a few of them were drops as well. I don't want to put it all on Aiden O'Connell, but they've got to find a way to be on the same page, get things going. I'll tell you right now, the Raiders offense goes through the ground game, whether it's Josh Jacobs or Zamir White. And that's how Antonio Pierce is built. That's the identity of the Raiders. They want to be tough, smash mouth. They want to run the rock, and that opens up everything else. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that they're going to start the game off with run, pass. They're not going to do it like that. They could start out very easily throwing the ball, but at some point, they want to hit that 20, 25 carries per game mark. They feel very comfortable to win that game when they have that mark. So I'm going to look at, the ground game to get going. It was able to get going late against Kansas City. It helped them salt away that win on Christmas, but get going a little bit earlier, have a little bit of success. And Aiden got to complete some passes and get in the end zone, man. Those field goals aren't going to win too many games in the league, but I think that they have a real good opportunity to win this game on the strength of their defense and that offense just being complementary. It doesn't have to be lights out. That's no disrespect to the Colts. It just has to be complementary of the job that the defense is doing. Right now, this Raiders team is led by the defense.
Yeah. And I want to say to any Colts fans that are listening to this episode, I mean, this is a tougher game on paper, and this is a tougher game just in reality than what maybe it looks like on paper. The Raiders are a different team the last couple weeks. I know 3 weeks ago they were shut out, but these last two games, they have really been just a very different football team. They're playing really well under their interim head coach. And a lot of it will come down to what the Colts are made out of in this one. And if Michael Pittman Jr. plays, that's another really big thing.
Yeah, big one.
Will the Colts be able to score without Michael Pittman Jr. would be a big thing. So hopefully he can go. But assuming that he does go this week, Shane Steichen's done a really good job this year of not letting the Colts get too low. We come off games where it's like, this is the all-time low for this team. That you can't get much worse. I mean, the Saints game where Derek Carr looked like Drew Brees in that game, just chucking it, not missing any throws. They were getting run all over. It was a beatdown. in epic proportions, they come back and they beat the Carolina Panthers after that. You go to that Bengals game where the screen game is killing them. They lose by 20 in a really big AFC playoff game type atmosphere. They come back the next week. They win 30-13 over the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team they hadn't beaten since 2009. They were able to beat them just like that, coming off of that bad loss. So they're coming off another really brutal loss. And luckily, this one didn't hurt them in the playoff race. But how do they respond? That's always the biggest thing with NFL teams. How do you respond? How do you deal with adversity? And I think that Shane Steichen's done a great job all year of getting this team able to respond and kind of forgetting what happened the week before. So as long as they can come into this game, play their game, play mistake-free football, keep the success rate high on offense, and just keep that ball moving, I think they can do enough to outscore Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders offense. Now, again, Mac Crosby is a game wrecker. Jack Jones is starting to look like a game wrecker as well. Right. Those two guys are looking like game wreckers on that defense, and they're playing some good football. But we have seen this Colts offense do some good things against top defenses this year. They put up nearly 40 points against the Cleveland Browns. They put up 31 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have been able to score on top defenses this year. So a big thing with this one will be just, again, keeping everything contained, keeping everything in front of you, playing within your game, not forcing things. And please, for the love of God, defense, get some pressure on Aiden O'Connell. Like, can we not get picked apart by another backup quarterback? Let's make sure, that they're taking away the flats, making him have to force some things down the field and kind of hurry up his process a little bit. But I think as long as the Colts stay within themselves, stay within their game, play some controlled football, they should be able to come out victorious in this one. But Q, do you have a score prediction for us, or do you not do those things?
I normally don't, but I will, right? I normally don't, but I'll try my best at it because it's so funny. A lot of times I end up overshooting for both teams, and then when I try to say, oh, it's going to be a low-scoring game, then I end up going too low. So I'm going to go, I think, and I'll just say it, full disclosure, I've already said on record that I think that the Raiders are going to win the last two games of the season, so I'm not going to change it now. I think that the Raiders are going to win this one 17-10. I think it's going to be a close game. I think the Colts are going to have the ball at the end with an opportunity to go down the field and tie it, and somehow the Raiders make a defensive play. I have that much confidence in the defense right now. And again, this is strange territory for me. It's like I don't swim, but I feel like I'm in the ocean right now, and and I'm not drowning. And it's like, wow, how is this possible? Like, I don't even know how to swim, and I'm doing the Michael Phelps out here, right? It feels weird just to say that the strength of this Raiders team is the defense, but it really is, and they're making plays and they're expecting to make plays. So that's what really has me like in awe of like, how is this even happening? So I'm going to go ahead and ride that strength and say that they're going to keep doing that and being who they are. And Max is going to be Max, and Malcolm Kuntz is going to be Kuntz. And you mentioned Jack Jones, and Meek Robertson is making plays. And I'll say this, the one guy I'll tell you to look out for as well, Robert Spillane. He doesn't get talked about a lot, but, man, he is playing his backside off, man. The Raiders picked him up as a free agent from Pittsburgh. I had no idea what to expect. Reached out to Chris Carter, Locked On Steelers. He was like, yeah, he's a good thumper, but he's not really good in coverage. And everyone I talked to that covers Pittsburgh is like, yeah, he's okay, but he'll frustrate you. He has been money. He has been fantastic. He's got 3 interceptions on the season. He's one of the captains. He plays with a motor like Max Crosby, which is hard to think of, because not many have a motor of Max Crosby. So that's the other name I'll say look out for. 41, Robert Spillane. He's playing with his hair on fire. But, yeah, 17-10, man. Ultimately, I think the Raiders get the victory and improve their overall record to 8-8. So how do you see this one shaking out?
Yeah, every time I think it's going to be a defensive slugfest for the Colts this year, it ends up being this high-scoring, crazy game that the Colts, where Minshew throws 8 interceptions and the defense takes away the ball 6 times too, and it's like, oh my God, like the Cleveland Browns game. I mean, who would have thought that both teams would nearly hang 40 in that one, with PJ Walker and Gardner Minshew in that one? But
course, right?
Yeah, it's crazy with this Colts team. But no, I think this is going to be a little high scoring just because of that. But I do think ultimately the Colts are going to come out on top in this one because, look, at the end of the day, Shane Steichen is a really smart offensive play caller, really smart offensive coach who's been able to get the most out of this team. And I don't want to believe that this Cinderella run is over yet. So I think the Colts are going to take this one. Let's go 26-20 in this one. A little bit higher scoring game. Some field goals from the Colts in this one that get it done. But Q, I want to thank you yet again for joining me. I know we always end up doing the crossovers together. So hopefully we get to see each other next year.
So there it is right there. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. Zach thinks it's going to be a higher scoring game. We both think that our team respectfully is going to win. I believe the Raiders are going to get the dub. I believe the Raiders are the better team. I know that the Colts are sitting there in the number 7 seed right now, and they're actually in the playoffs where the Raiders aren't. But I don't think that matters right now. I think that the Raiders are cooking with grease. I think that the Raiders are playing with some really good defense, and that strength of the defense is going to get it done. biggest thing to that is, like I mentioned with Zach, got to find a way to get it done and let the offense complement the defense. And, of course, we'll talk about keys to victory. We'll talk about what it's going to take away for the Raiders to get the third win in a row coming up on Sunday versus the Colts. We'll do that on tomorrow's show. We'll get back to the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. We'll get some calls and texts for sure. I got some really good stuff from Brandon Jacobs, former Giants running back, two-time Super Bowl champ, former teammate of Antonio Pierce. He was actually on my radio show on Wednesday, so I'll bring a couple of those nuggets to the show as well. Got a lot to really get to and a lot to like as we close out the week really strong. So we'll do that tomorrow, Raider Nation. Appreciate you as always. Thanks so much for making the show your first listen of the day. And until Friday, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.